Welcome. Take a moment. If you're listening to this right now, there's a good chance you're carrying something you rarely talk about. It's not lewd pain. It's quieter than that. It shows up after a familiar conversation, after a family dinner, after a call you didn't want to answer but did anyway. You sit alone in your car, or in the kitchen, or staring at the ceiling late at night, and a strange thought crosses your mind. Why do I feel lighter when I leave than when I stay? You tell yourself it's loyalty, history, blood, shared years. You tell yourself this is just what adults do. They endure, they adjust, they keep the peace. But what if the cost is higher than you admit? And what if staying loyal to certain people slowly teaches you to abandon yourself? This isn't about anger or cutting people off out of spite. It's about something older, quieter, stronger. There's a way to protect your inner world without becoming bitter. A way to choose distance without hatred. A way to stay disciplined, calm, and intact. Let's begin there. Let's begin there. With that quiet cost you feel but rarely name. Loyalty sounds noble. It's praised early. Stay, endure, don't rock the boat. In American families, loyalty often looks like showing up no matter how drained you are, answering the call even when your chest tightens, sitting through dinners where the jokes land a little too sharp, nodding along, smiling, letting comments pass, telling yourself it's easier this way. You don't leave angry, you leave tired. There's a moment that repeats itself. You're driving home. The radio is off. Your shoulders finally drop. And without meaning to, you breathe deeper than you did the entire time you were there. That's when the conflict shows up. Because part of you still believes loyalty means staying available, and another part of you knows something inside you is shrinking. Self-respect rarely announces itself. It doesn't demand applause. It whispers through discomfort, through the hesitation, before you say yes again, through the way you pause before sharing good news, already bracing for how it might be received. Stoic thinkers paid close attention to moments like this, not the dramatic ones, the quiet ones that reveal alignment or the lack of it. They believed character is shaped not by what we claim to value, but by what we repeatedly tolerate. Marcus Aurelius wrote about living in accordance with nature, not nature as the world outside you, but the one inside. Your capacity for steadiness, for dignity, for clear judgment. When loyalty asks you to ignore those things, it stops being virtue. It becomes habit. and habits can be dangerous when they're no longer examined. Here's the distinction Stoicism makes, and it matters. Loyalty is not obedience. It's not self-abandonment. It's not staying silent while something in you erodes. A Stoic doesn't ask, "How do I keep everyone comfortable?" He asks, "What kind of person am I becoming by staying here like this?" That question changes everything. Because now, the choice isn't about them. It's about you. About whether your time, attention, and emotional energy are being spent in ways that strengthen your character or slowly compromise it. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't justify itself in long explanations. It notices patterns. Who listens when you speak plainly? Who dismisses your limits with a joke? Who seems unsettled when you grow steadier, calmer, less reactive? The Stoics believed we don't control others, but we are fully responsible for where we place ourselves. That's where loyalty and self-respect diverge. Loyalty says, "I'll stay because I always have." Self-respect asks, "What is this costing me over time?" And sometimes the cost isn't visible right away. It shows up as tension in your body, as a shorter fuse elsewhere, as the quiet loss of enthusiasm you once had. This isn't about turning cold or cutting people off without care. It's about recognizing that you cannot build a stable inner life while constantly negotiating your worth. When loyalty demands silence where honesty is needed, or endurance where boundaries are required, it stops being strength. And something more disciplined is asked of you. Not reaction, not resentment, clarity. Clarity has a way of rearranging things. Once you see it, you start noticing how uneven your life feels. Not everywhere, just around certain people. You answer their call immediately. You give them your time, your patience, your explanations, your emotional bandwidth, and afterward, you feel spent. This is where a quiet but difficult truth begins to surface. Not everyone deserves the same level of access to you. Access is not about love. It's about proximity, about who gets close enough to influence your mood, your focus, your sense of self. In everyday American life, we already understand this principle. You don't give every coworker the same authority. You don't hand your house keys to everyone you know. You don't let just anyone interrupt your workday and expect your full attention. Yet emotionally, many of us do exactly that. We open the door wide because of history, because of a shared last name, because we've always done it this way. The Stoics saw this as a failure of judgment, not of compassion. They believed that life is shaped by where we place our attention and trust, and that these things are limited resources. Once spent, they don't come back. Epictetus spoke often about what is truly ours to govern: our choices, our responses, our associations. He warned that giving unearned access to your inner life is a form of surrender, not dramatic, just gradual. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens through small permissions, letting a dismissive comment slide, ignoring the tension in your body, sharing personal things with people who've already shown they mishandle them. You don't call it access at first. You call it being understanding, being patient, being the bigger person. But over time, something shifts. You notice you're editing yourself, choosing safer words, withholding good news, preparing explanations before you've even been questioned. That's not closeness. That's self-protection kicking in too late. Stoicism doesn't ask you to harden your heart. It asks you to become precise, to distinguish between caring and overexposing, between kindness and self-neglect. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your mind should be guarded like a fortress, not closed, just protected. A fortress still lets people in, but not everyone, and not without discernment. This is where many people misunderstand Stoic discipline. They think it means emotional distance from everyone. It doesn't. It means earned access. Some people get the front door. They've shown consistency, respect, a willingness to meet you in truth. Others get limited access, short visits, surface-level conversations, clear boundaries around time and topics. And some people lose access altogether, not as punishment, but as consequence. Because access isn't inherited, it's demonstrated. You can care about someone and still decide they don't get full entry into your inner world. You can wish them well and still protect your peace. That distinction matters. When you stop offering the same access to everyone, something steadies inside you. You stop explaining yourself so much. You stop bracing for impact. You start moving through your days with more consistency. This isn't withdrawal, it's alignment. And once you understand that access is a choice, not an obligation, you regain something essential: control over where your life energy goes. That's not cold, that's disciplined. And discipline, when practiced quietly, is one of the deepest forms of self-respect. Alignment brings awareness, and awareness sharpens the moment of choice. It rarely arrives once. It returns again and again. In ordinary scenes that look harmless on the surface, a comment slips out at a family barbecue. Just a joke, they say. You smile even though something tightens behind your ribs. You tell yourself it's not worth addressing. That's one moment. Later, you share a small win. Nothing dramatic, just progress. The room goes quiet. Someone changes the subject. Someone else adds a comparison that dulls the edge of your excitement. You feel foolish for bringing it up. That's another. A phone lights up late. They need something. Advice, support, a favor that somehow can't wait. You hesitate. You answer anyway. You hang up, drained. That's another moment. At work, you're asked to rearrange your schedule again. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just an assumption that you'll adjust. You do. You tell yourself it's easier than pushing back. Another moment. Boundaries get tested this way, not with force, with repetition. Someone laughs when you say, "That doesn't work for me," calls you sensitive, says you've changed. You soften your tone. You explain more than you plan to. Another moment passes. You notice how often you're rehearsing conversations in your head, how carefully you choose words, how much energy goes into staying agreeable. Another moment. Then there's the silence, the withdrawal that comes when you don't comply. Short replies, cold pauses, a subtle punishment that leaves you second-guessing yourself. Another moment. And finally, the relief. You skip a gathering. You don't return a call right away. Your body loosens. Your breathing deepens. You feel steadier. That's the moment that tells the truth. Stoicism doesn't see these as separate incidents. It sees a pattern. 8 moments. One choice repeated. Each time you either reinforce the same dynamic or you adjust your position within it. The Stoics believed character is shaped through repetition, not by grand decisions, by small, consistent ones. Every time you ignore what your judgment is quietly telling you, you teach yourself that peace is negotiable. Every time you act with calm firmness, even when it feels uncomfortable, you strengthen something inside you. This is where people misunderstand Stoic discipline. They think it's about suppressing emotion. It's not. It's about responding from clarity instead of reflex. You don't confront every slight. You don't explain yourself endlessly. You don't demand understanding. You simply notice what each situation asks of you. Does staying require you to shrink? Does agreeing require you to betray your own limits? Does keeping the peace cost you your steadiness afterward? If it does, the choice becomes clearer. Not dramatic, not cruel, just precise. Over time, those choices accumulate. They shape who has access. They shape how much weight others' opinions carry. They shape the tone of your inner life. This isn't about cutting people off in a single decisive act. It's about choosing yourself in small, disciplined ways until the structure of the relationship changes. Some people adjust, some don't, but either way, you do. And with each repeated choice, made from self-respect rather than habit, your life begins to feel less reactive, more deliberate, more yours, more yours. And that's when guilt usually shows up, not as a question, as a noise. It arrives after you don't answer right away, after you say no without explaining, after you choose rest over obligation. It speaks fast. You're being selfish. They're family. You're overreacting. This is just how it is. Guilt is loud because it's learned. Most of us were taught early that being good meant being available, being understanding, being the one who doesn't make things difficult. So, when you finally step back even slightly, your body reacts before your mind can catch up. Your stomach tightens. Your thoughts race. You replay conversations that haven't even happened yet. Wisdom doesn't argue with that noise. It doesn't raise its voice to compete. It waits. Stoic thinkers understood this well. They knew guilt often has nothing to do with virtue. It's a reflex, a social echo. Epictetus warned that the most dangerous form of control isn't physical, it's emotional. When your sense of right and wrong is dictated by how others react to your boundaries, that's when guilt becomes a leash. Notice how it works. You set a limit, nothing dramatic, just enough to protect your time or energy. And suddenly the tone shifts. They sound hurt, or disappointed, or cold. You feel the pull to fix it, to smooth things over, to explain yourself until they feel better. Not because you were wrong, but because their discomfort feels unbearable. This is where wisdom speaks quietly. It asks a different question. Not, how do I make this feeling go away? But is this guilt pointing to a moral failure or just a broken pattern? Stoicism teaches that virtue is not measured by how little discomfort you cause others. It's measured by whether your actions align with reason, integrity, and self-command. If your choice is calm, if it's consistent, if it's made without malice, then the presence of guilt doesn't make it rare. It just makes it unfamiliar. In American culture, we talk a lot about independence, about standing on your own 2 feet. But emotionally, many people still live on borrowed approval. They feel free in theory, but trapped in practice. Wisdom cuts through that slowly. It reminds you that guilt fades when it isn't fed. That silence after a boundary is not an emergency. that you don't owe access to someone just because they're uncomfortable without it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about acting in accordance with your nature, not the expectations placed on you. Your nature as a rational, self-governing being. That kind of alignment often feels lonely at first, not because it's wrong, but because you're no longer bending where you used to. Guilt wants you to go back to what's familiar. Wisdom wants you to stay where you're steady. One shouts, the other doesn't rush. And over time, if you listen closely, you'll notice something. The guilt loses intensity. The clarity remains. You stop reacting to every emotional tug. You stop needing permission to protect your inner life. Not because you stopped caring, but because you learned the difference between care and surrender. Guilt is loud. Wisdom is quiet. And if you give it time, wisdom always outlasts the noise. Wisdom lasts. And once it settles, it asks for form. Not ideas, not intentions, action. This is where many people hesitate. They understand the pattern. They feel the cost. But when it comes time to move differently, they freeze. So the Stoics kept things simple, not easy. Simple. 3 movements. Repeated, quiet, name it, bound it, love it. It starts with naming, not labeling people, labeling behavior. You notice what actually happens, not how it's explained afterward, not how it's justified. You notice how often your needs are dismissed, how jokes land at your expense, how requests always seem urgent when they benefit someone else. You don't dramatize it. You don't soften it either. You tell yourself the truth in plain language. This drains me. This crosses a line. This isn't mutual. Naming brings relief because it ends confusion. And confusion is where most people lose years of their lives. Then comes the harder part. Bounding, not speeches, not debates. Boundaries are not negotiations. They're decisions expressed through behavior. Sometimes it's a sentence. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. I won't be discussing that. Short, calm, final. Other times it's an action. You leave earlier than usual. You stop answering immediately. You decline the invitation without a story attached. This is where discomfort spikes. People push back. They question. They test. That's normal. Stoicism teaches that resistance often appears right after clarity, not because you're wrong, but because the old pattern is losing leverage. Bounding isn't about getting agreement. It's about establishing reality. And reality only sticks when it's lived. That's the 3rd movement. Live it. This is where discipline shows up. You don't restate the boundary every time. You don't remind. You don't warn. You follow through. If you said no late-night calls, you let them ring. If you said you're stepping back, you don't step forward to relieve their discomfort. If you limited access, you honor that limit consistently. At first, it feels unnatural, even cold. But over time, something steadies. Your nervous system recalibrates. Your thoughts slow down. You stop scanning for reactions. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when we stop needing external approval to maintain internal order. This is what he meant. Living your boundaries trains you to trust yourself again, not your impulses, your judgment. Some people adjust. They respect the new structure. They show you who they are when access isn't automatic. Others drift. They accuse. They disengage. You don't chase either outcome because the goal was never control. It was coherence. Name it. So you're not confused. Bound it so you're not depleted. Live it so your actions match your values. This isn't self-improvement. It's self-governance. And when you practice it quietly without announcement, something changes in how you move through the world. Less urgency, less explanation, more steadiness. You don't feel powerful. You feel grounded, and that's how real strength usually shows up. Grounded. That's the word that begins to fit. Not happy, not triumphant, just steady. You notice it in small places first. Mornings feel quieter. Your jaw isn't clenched when you check your phone. You finish a conversation and don't replay it on the drive home. Nothing dramatic changed. No speeches were made. No doors were slammed. And yet something inside you is no longer bracing. That's when it becomes clear. Peace isn't a reward. It's information. You didn't argue your way into this feeling. You didn't convince anyone. You didn't win. You simply adjusted where you placed yourself, and your body responded before your thoughts caught up. Stoic thinkers trusted signals like this. Not moods, not impulses. Signals. They believed the body often recognizes alignment before the mind does. Tension eases when something is right. Agitation returns when something is off. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what is good for your nature brings harmony. What isn't brings disturbance. That's not poetry. It's observation. Think about the last time you chose distance, even briefly. A skipped gathering, a delayed response, a firm no that didn't come with a paragraph attached. What happened afterward? Did your breathing slow? Did your shoulders drop? Did your thoughts feel less scattered? That response matters. Peace is data because it's consistent. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't exaggerate. It shows up quietly when you stop placing yourself in situations that require constant self-defense. Many people ignore this information. They tell themselves peace is avoidance. That relief means weakness. That discomfort is proof they're doing the right thing. Stoicism disagrees. Stoicism asks whether your life is becoming more coherent, more stable, more aligned with reason. If distance brings clarity instead of chaos, if space brings focus instead of emptiness, that's not avoidance. That's correction. Correction doesn't always feel good at first. It feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. Over time, you start trusting this feedback. You stop questioning every calm moment. You stop assuming tension is normal. You begin to recognize the difference between effort and strain. Effort builds, strain erodes. Relationships that are right for your life don't require recovery afterward. They don't leave you exhausted, irritable, or scattered. They allow you to remain yourself. Peace reveals this without accusation, without drama. It doesn't say who is good or bad. It simply shows you where you function best. This is why Stoicism places such importance on inner steadiness, not because it makes life comfortable, but because it makes it clear. Clear enough to notice patterns. Clear enough to adjust course. Clear enough to stop arguing with evidence. You don't need to explain your calm to anyone. You don't need to justify why your life feels lighter now. The data speaks for itself. And when you begin trusting peace as feedback, rather than fearing it as selfishness, your decisions change. Not abruptly, not dramatically. They become quieter, more precise. You choose environments that don't drain you. You invest energy where it's met with respect. You step back without guilt when your system tells you something is off. Peace isn't the end goal. It's the signal that you're moving in the right direction. And once you learn to read it, you stop negotiating with what your body and mind already know. You listen. And over time, listening changes how you move. Not with sudden declarations, not with burned bridges, but with a quieter kind of certainty. You start noticing what no longer fits. Conversations that leave you smaller. Rooms where your shoulders tense the moment you arrive. Relationships that ask for your silence more than your presence. You don't announce your exit. You don't make a case. You simply stop offering what costs too much. That's where many people get it wrong. They confuse protection with punishment, distance with hatred, boundaries with cruelty. Stoicism never taught that. It taught responsibility. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your mind is your own domain, not because it's fragile, but because it's powerful, and power requires stewardship. When you protect your inner world, you're not rejecting others. You're refusing to live at odds with yourself. That distinction matters. You can care deeply and still step back. You can wish someone well and still limit access. You can love family and still decide certain patterns no longer belong in your life. None of that requires bitterness. It requires clarity. Clarity is choosing environments where you don't have to brace yourself. It's choosing conversations where honesty doesn't feel dangerous. It's choosing relationships that don't demand you shrink to remain connected. The Stoics believed a good life is one lived in alignment, where actions and values don't fight each other, where peace isn't something you chase after chaos, but something you build into your daily decisions. That kind of life doesn't come from endurance alone. It comes from discernment. You've seen how it works now. Loyalty without self-respect drains you. Access without standards destabilizes you. Guilt without examination keeps you stuck. But discipline, quiet, consistent discipline, restores order. You name what's real. You place limits without hostility. You live those limits long enough for the truth to surface. Some people meet you there. Others fall away. You don't need to label either outcome, because the measure was never who stayed. It was who you became in the process. If distance brings you back to yourself, if space returns your steadiness, if peace shows up when you stop negotiating your worth, that's not cruelty. That's maturity. You're allowed to choose calm over chaos, clarity over guilt, inner order over outdated loyalty. And you don't need permission to do it. As you move forward, take this with you. Your inner world is not public property. Your time is not unlimited. Your peace is not a luxury. Guard it the way you would guard anything sacred. Without drama, without apology. If this resonated, let it sit with you. You don't have to act all at once. Just notice the next moment when a choice appears, and choose from steadiness. That's where a disciplined life begins.